A specialized unit of border collies was conducting standard training in the frost-covered mountains when something extraordinary unfolded. Their trainer, momentarily preoccupied, couldn't locate them. The dogs, guided solely by intuition and devotion, wandered into the dense woodland. That's when they discovered him, a man barely responsive, beaten and wounded, with restraints cutting into his flesh as he dangled helplessly from an ice-covered oak. It was a park warden abandoned to perish in complete isolation. But rather than fleeing or barking aimlessly, the canines performed something utterly unexpected. What transpired next was a sequence of behaviors so calculated, so touching, and so remarkably human-like that it reduced hardened officers to tears. This isn't merely a tale of endurance. It's a profound demonstration of faith, bravery, and how occasionally those we believe require our protection most are actually the ones who ultimately rescue us. Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel, give this video a thumbs up, and activate notifications. That's how we continue sharing these unforgettable narratives of devotion, perseverance, and the connection between humans and dogs that transcends all expectations. The frost had been descending for hours, concealing the paths of Frost Creek National Sanctuary beneath a pristine, sparkling covering. Few were brave enough to enter this region of Montana during the harsh winter except for wardens like Michael Sullivan. At 42, Michael had devoted 2 decades of his existence to safeguarding the terrain, the wildlife, and the visitors who traveled through. But today he wasn't on duty. He wasn't monitoring poachers or assisting disoriented hikers. He was bound to an oak. His breathing came in brief, icy gasps. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, flowing down to his frost-bitten cheek. Heavy restraints encircled his torso and limbs, securing him against the gnarled oak as if he were part of it. His wrists, tied behind him, were already raw, the skin broken from struggling. His uniform was ripped, drenched in a mixture of blood and melted frost. He couldn't feel his fingers anymore, could barely maintain consciousness. It had been 48 hours since he'd been ambushed. He recalled the voices, furious, muffled under winter masks. They demanded entry to the sanctuary, territory for illicit hunting, logging, and whatever else currency could purchase in the shadows. Michael refused, so they made him an example, abandoned him in the woodland to freeze, to vanish without a trace. But something was approaching. Initially just a murmur in the breeze, then gentle thuds crunching through the frost. Michael opened his swollen eyes. Was it another hallucination? He strained to differentiate reality from imagination. That's when he noticed them. 5 silhouettes, dark against the frost, moving low and methodically. At first, terror surged in his chest. Wolves? But as the figures drew nearer, he realized these weren't wild hunters. They were elite border collies, their coats dense, sprinkled with frost, their eyes vigilant, amber and precise. Each moved with intention, not like strays but like soldiers on a mission. One of them, larger than the rest, stepped forward and sniffed the air. He locked eyes with Michael, and then something remarkable occurred. The dog didn't bark. He didn't growl. He sat directly in front of Michael, ears alert, chest proud, like a sculpture. Then another approached, sniffing the base of the oak. Another began circling the area. The others spread out in a pattern that appeared tactical. These dogs weren't lost. They were trained. Michael felt tears sting the edges of his eyes. He managed to whisper, "Good boys." The alpha collie, the one with a mark over his right eye, took a step forward and sniffed at the restraint. He barked once, short, sharp. It resonated through the trees. The dogs began to act. One started excavating in the frost around the restraint, revealing the lock. Another jumped up, barking toward the sky, alerting someone or something. Minutes felt like eternities. Michael drifted in and out of awareness, but just before darkness claimed him again, he heard it. Distant voices, footsteps rushing through the woodland, and then a human voice. Urgent. I see him over here. Through the haze of frost and agony, he saw a woman in a ranger uniform flanked by more handlers coming through the trees. The dogs had brought help. But as Michael's vision began to fade, he caught one last glimpse. The alpha collie standing just a few feet away, gazing at him. Not with curiosity, not with confusion, with understanding. And then Michael passed out. Michael awoke to the sharp scent of antiseptic and the low beeping of a heart monitor. His body ached tremendously. The harsh fluorescent light of the ranger station's medical wing stung his eyes. After days in the freezing wilderness, his skin seemed burned by the heat. A nurse appeared beside him. "You're safe now," she said gently. "You're fortunate they found you in time." Michael tried to speak, but his voice emerged as a rasp. "The dogs? Where are the dogs?" She smiled. "They're outside. The K9 unit that found you. They've been waiting, especially one of them, the big one with the mark." Later that day, Ranger Captain Wilson came in, her face a mixture of relief and restrained anger. Wilson was a resilient woman in her 50s, built like a maple tree and just as unmovable. "Sullivan," she said gruffly, pulling a chair close, "you've got one hell of a story to tell." "How did they find me?" Michael asked. Wilson explained that the K9 team had been running a winter training circuit. They got separated from their handler after a sudden blizzard. They returned to the main station, barking frantically. One of the handlers, Emily Torres, knew something was wrong. She trusted them, followed them, and they led her straight to Michael. "You were bound to an oak in a sector that hasn't been patrolled in over 5 years, Wilson added, showing him a map. "No active trails, no campsites, no access roads. Whoever did this to you knew exactly where to abandon someone they didn't want found." Michael clenched his jaw. "Illegal operations. They wanted me silent." Wilson stood and opened the door to the hallway. A moment later, in padded a large border collie, calm, steady, his marked eye still precise. He walked straight to Michael's bed and rested his head gently on the mattress. "Meet Ranger," Wilson said. 8 years old, decorated service K9, retired from duty after his handler was killed during a rescue mission. Since then, he's had trouble adapting. Doesn't bond, doesn't trust, but for some reason, he chose you. Michael reached out and touched the dog's thick neck. Ranger closed his eyes and leaned into the touch like it was the only warmth he'd ever known. Emily Torres, the handler, walked in next. "Ranger's never acted like this before," she said, voice full of wonder. "Not since he lost his partner. It's like something shifted in him when he found you." "I wasn't just another rescue to him," Michael replied. "He understood what I was experiencing." Just then, the door burst open. A deputy entered, face pale. "Captain, we found fresh tire marks near Sector 12, and restraints recently cut. Someone was back there last night." Wilson's expression hardened. "They came back," Michael realized. "They think I'm still out there. They're tying up loose ends." The room went silent. Ranger stood, ears sharp, tail rigid. Something was coming. That evening, Michael sat near the window, wrapped in a thermal blanket. He couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was holding its breath. Ranger lay at his feet like a sentinel. Emily entered quietly, holding coffee. "We're bringing in federal investigators. This case goes beyond poaching. Too coordinated, too clean." Michael looked down at Ranger. "And someone made a mistake." "Ranger," Emily said. "He wasn't supposed to be there. None of them were, but they found you." "They weren't lost." Michael leaned forward. "They were sent." Emily looked confused. "No one sent them. Then something else did." Emily had spent years training K9 units. She knew when something went beyond explanation. "He hasn't left your side once," she said softly. "He reminds me of the kind of warden I used to be," Michael replied. "Loyal, relentless, always alert. Do you think he could work with you? Emily asked. What do you mean? Rangers never connected with anyone like this. If you wanted to keep him, you'd both need to train together. But I think he's already chosen. Before Michael could answer, Ranger barked suddenly. He stood up fast, muscles tense, ears back, nose high. There came a faint sound, metal on metal, from the back of the building. Then the power went out. Everything plunged into darkness. Stay here, Emily said, pulling out her flashlight. I'll check it out. But Ranger growled and moved to block the door. He doesn't want you to go alone, Michael said calmly. Outside, a shape moved past the window. Then came the crash of breaking glass at the far end of the station. Emily raised her radio. We've got an intruder. South entrance. A loud bang echoed through the hall. Michael grabbed a hatchet from the wall. We need to move. Ranger led the way with eyes sharp and body low. They moved silently through the narrow corridor. Then they heard a voice. I told you he wouldn't die out there. Michael's blood turned to ice. They were back, and they weren't planning on leaving witnesses. They reached the generator room. Michael signaled silence. Ranger's body stiffened. Michael took a deep breath and kicked the door open. The room appeared empty until a man lunged from behind the generator, swinging a crowbar. Michael ducked just in time. Ranger launched forward, jaws clamping down on the attacker's arm. The man screamed in rage. Stupid dog. Michael pinned him against the wall. You were supposed to kill me and walk away, huh? Emily cuffed the man, but he grinned. You think I'm the only one? Outside, flashlights danced in the distance. Then gunfire erupted. West side came a deputy's voice. They're breaching the vehicle garage. They're not here for me anymore, Michael said. They're here to erase everything. Ranger sprinted toward the main entrance. Through the window, Michael saw two masked figures breaking into the garage. One snowmobile was already running. They're planning to escape through the North Ridge, Emily said. If they get into those woods, we'll never find them. Michael looked at Ranger. Can you stop them? Ranger took off through the emergency exit. In the clearing beyond the garage, one intruder had climbed onto the snowmobile. But just as he turned to speed off, Ranger collided with him mid-chest, throwing him into a snowdrift. The second figure raised a weapon, but Michael hurled his hatchet, striking the gunman's arm. Emily tackled him moments later. Deputies arrived, securing the scene. Michael stood in the snow and then saw Ranger limping toward him. A bullet grazed above his leg. Michael dropped to his knees and opened his arms. Ranger rested his head on Michael's chest. You saved us again, Michael whispered. That night, after Ranger had been treated, Emily entered the medical bay with files. They're refusing to talk. All three of them. No names, no ID. That doesn't make sense. They knew everything about our operations. Emily handed him a smaller folder. Inside was a form granting a civilian contractor access to the reserve. The signature wasn't Michael's. Someone forged this, Michael said. Emily nodded. Someone with internal clearance. Later, Michael stepped outside for air. Snow fell lightly. Ranger limped beside him. Then they saw Captain Wilson standing alone near the perimeter. Wilson turned and gave a forced smile. Couldn't sleep either? Something like that, Michael replied. Wilson sighed. They were just trying to make a deal. I didn't know they'd chain you up like that. That wasn't part of the plan. Michael froze. It was you. You were in the way, Wilson said coldly. You kept blocking permits, digging into reports. They offered money, just to look the other way. You left me there to die. I didn't think you'd survive. No one could have. Not in that storm. She glanced at Ranger. But I didn't count on him. Ranger growled, body rigid. Wilson stepped back. Look, walk away from this. You and that dog get a medal, retire early, and no one ever knows. Michael shook his head. You think I'm going to stay quiet? Wilson's hand moved to her belt. Ranger lunged before she could draw. The captain hit the ground, pinned by 70 pounds of trained force. You betrayed your oath. You betrayed me, Michael said. Wilson was arrested. The truth unraveled. A network of illegal land sales, forged access for criminal groups. The betrayal stung Michael deeply. He had trusted Wilson for years, and yet she had left him to die. But Ranger never left his side. He followed Michael through every interview, every briefing. Deputies no longer saw him as just a canine. They began treating him like a guardian, something between man and myth. They're offering you a transfer, Emily told Michael one evening. Back to Missoula. Full benefits. Desk job. Michael looked down at Ranger. Do I look like someone who belongs behind a desk? They're not going to stop, are they? No. There's too much money buried in these trees. Then I stay. Emily handed him an envelope. This is your official transfer into the K-9 division. Ranger's been cleared for reactivation under your command. Michael knelt beside Ranger. What do you say, partner? Ranger barked softly, a sound that said yes, but the peace felt thin. That sense of being watched returned. Deputies reported odd disturbances. One evening, the security monitors went black. Michael stepped outside, Ranger at his side. They reached the edge of the fence. Nothing, snow, trees, silence, but then a sound, a metallic rattle that haunted Michael in his sleep. A figure darted behind a tree. Before it vanished completely, a glint of silver caught the moonlight. A badge. It wasn't over. Someone else from inside was still out there. The next day, Michael and Emily investigated an inactive patrol cabin. Ranger jumped from the truck, hackles rising. Inside, there were recent footprints and the lock had been broken. They reached the back room, and a gunshot shattered the silence. It hit Ranger, who collapsed with a sharp yelp. The shooter stepped into view, Deputy Paul Reed, one of Wilson's men. You should have stayed dead, Warden. Wilson was just the face. I'm the one who built this. You shot my dog. Michael trembled with rage. Emily crept behind Reed. Michael kept him talking until Emily dropped him with a blow to the knee. Michael cradled Ranger. Don't you give up on me. Not now. The veterinary unit confirmed Ranger would survive. The story of the bound warden and the K-9 who saved him spread widely. When Ranger opened his eyes after surgery, he looked directly at Michael and wagged his tail. Michael smiled through tears. You're coming home, partner. Weeks passed. A new patrol unit formed from the ashes of betrayal. Michael led the Sierra K-9 task force. Emily became chief of operations, and Ranger returned to the field, older but stronger than ever. Every patrol they walked side by side, and everyone knew that if danger came again, loyalty would be waiting with eyes sharp and a heart that never gave up. If this story inspired you, remember true courage doesn't wear a cape. It walks on 4 legs and never lets you down. Subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share this video with someone who needs to believe in loyalty.